All right, football fans, welcome to a Tuesday episode of the Call Sheet Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Smith, here at the Fans First Sports Network. And on today's show, an interesting topic as we look at the best players in NFL history to retire early. And that topic is coming on the heels of the news out yesterday that Detroit Lions All-Pro center Frank Ragnow, 7 years in the league, four-time Pro Bowler, All-Pro center, led one of the most dramatic turnarounds in NFL history from the time he was drafted in 2018 to an absolutely woeful Lions team until today, where the Lions are coming off of two of the most impressive seasons back-to-back in the NFL. Phenomenal turnaround in Detroit. Ragnow, one of the leaders of that movement, announces that he's retiring from the game at just 29 years old after, again, 7 NFL seasons. It came as a shock. My son, who's a Detroit Lions fan, we were eating dinner last night, and the news came across the ticker at the bottom of the ESPN on the TV, and he threw a mini temper tantrum. He was not happy. He was not pleased. Nobody wants to lose a favorite player or in his instance, a cornerstone to your franchise. This is a Detroit team, again, amazing turnaround. They've done some phenomenal things over the last couple of years to go from one of the worst franchises in the league to the best. But when you become one of the best, everybody else comes for you. They try to poach your players. They poach your coaches. We've seen Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, the two coordinators in Detroit, be hired away as head coaches now by other teams. And we've seen lots of Detroit Lions players leave via free agency because they've been given tremendous contract offers elsewhere. And now Ragnow, tough offseason right now for the Detroit Lions. But the news of Ragnow's retirement got me thinking about players who have departed the game in their prime. And I don't want to say too early because that's such a subjective notion. Like when is it too early for a player to leave? It's obviously something that has to be decided on an individual basis. But arguably, players in their prime, you could make an argument that Frank Ragnow is among the best 10 or 12 dozen or so players in NFL history to leave the game at the height of their talent and ability. Again, this is a guy coming off of multiple consecutive Pro Bowl seasons, one of the 3 or 4 best centers in the NFL, and still just 29 years old with 7 seasons under his belt. You could easily make the argument that he had several more high-level seasons left in him. But he said his body just couldn't withstand it. He didn't feel like he could get his body ready for the rigor of another NFL season. And so he steps away from the game. And so I compiled a top 5 list. Who do I feel are the 5 best players in NFL history to step away from the game in their prime? And I'll get to that momentarily. Here's a quick honorable mention. Guys who didn't make the top 5, but who were phenomenal players who left in most people's opinions surprisingly early. Andrew Luck, quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts, departed at just 29 years of age. I think the Luck leaving was surprising because he's a quarterback, and you feel as though quarterbacks can play a lot longer. I mean, Tom Brady won a Super Bowl over the age of 41. Aaron Rodgers has played now into his 40s. Matthew Stafford is still playing the game at a very high level. He'll be 38 years old this season. Quarterbacks can play the game longer because they take less hits. For Luck to step away at age 29 was shocking. Rob Gronkowski, not as shocking because of the physical nature of the way he played the game, but he did leave at age 30. And that was surprising because, again, he was in his prime coming off of a Super Bowl victory. A lot of people felt like Gronk had some more football in him. Patrick Willis, the linebacker for the 49ers, leaving the game at age 30. off of an all-pro season, but citing injuries. Most of these guys, it's injuries. They just don't feel like the body can do it anymore. Gale Sayers, 28 years old. Terrell Davis, 29 years old. I mean, Gale Sayers, we're going back into the 1960s here, but he was one of the most fabulous players in the game, played just 7 seasons, all pro, almost every one of them, until injuries really derailed his ability. Same with Terrell Davis. Terrell Davis had arguably 2 of the most impressive seasons back-to-back, 1997, 1998, by running back in NFL history. Over 2,000 yards in that 97 season. Broncos win back-to-back Super Bowls, but he steps away from the game because of concussion issues. And Bo Jackson. I mean, you can't submit a list like this without mentioning Bo Jackson, who stepped away of the game at age 29 after a hip injury suffered in a playoff game against the Cincinnati Bengals. It just felt like Bo Jackson was scratching the surface of his greatness as he was juggling both a pro football and pro baseball career and doing spectacular things in both. I really feel as though the football world was robbed of an all-time great when Bo Jackson had to step away. But our top 5 list, who are the 5 players who left the game in their prime or in the most surprising fashion? You could argue are the best to do so at a premature age. I'm starting at, I'll go from 5 to 1. At number 5, Luke Kuechly, linebacker for the Carolina Panthers. My older son Jake had a fat head of Luke Kuechly on his wall in his room growing up, and I actually think he still has it in his apartment. Now he's in his 20s. 8 seasons in the league, 7 Pro Bowls, a 5-time All-Pro, a Rookie of the Year, named to the All-Decade team in the 2010s. In his final season, again, just 28 years old, absolute prime of his career. In his final season, he had 144 tackles. Luke Kuechly was playing the game as well as, if not better than, any other linebacker in the league when he stepped away. I think that's what was so shocking about Luke Kuechly. He was young, 28, but he was playing so well. But he had a nasty series of concussions. And when he stepped away from the game in 2019, it was right after the NFL had just gone through all the concussion lawsuits, all the studies about concussions and their effects had come out. I think there was a lot of information that probably scared Luke Kuechly. He recognized what had already happened to him, and he probably thought, if I continue down this path, I'm going to be one of those stories of these football players who suffer dementia, who suffer mental problems that lead to suicides, lead to early deaths. A lot of really terrible stories about guys who played the game in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, etc., before a lot of this concussion research came out, who wound up in unfortunate and awful situations like that. And I think Luke Kuechly was very aware of that and stepped away from the game. Number 4, we mentioned Frank Ragnow as a Detroit Lion. Here's another one, Calvin Johnson, Megatron. A wide receiver unlike any other when he played the game. There are Megatron-esque players in the league right now. A guy like DK Metcalf comes to mind. DK Metcalf is not as good an overall receiver as Calvin Johnson was. I'm just talking about the physical specimen. 6'4", 235 pounds, 4'3" in the 40, a vertical jump that made him an absolute mismatch against any corner that you could put him up against. Impossible to cover one-on-one. 8 seasons in the league, 8 Pro Bowls. In 2012, he set the all-time single-season receiving record, which still stands today, 1,964 yards. Only Johnson and Cooper Kupp in NFL history have gone over 1,900 receiving yards in a season. In his final year in 2015, I mean, like Luke Kuechly, when Calvin Johnson stepped away from the game, he was playing at an exceptionally high level. In his final year, 2015, he had 88 catches for 1,214 yards and 9 touchdowns. Pro Bowl season. But you have to remember, Calvin Johnson played through the absolute worst of some horrendous years in Detroit. He was a member of the 0-16 Lions team, the first 0-16 team in NFL history. And when he stepped away the game at age 30, he cited some injury concerns. But he has come out since then and said he could have kept playing. But he really lost his desire playing for such a woeful franchise. And he wasn't he wasn't going to hold out. He wasn't going to demand a new contract. He wasn't going to demand a trade. He just simply decided the combination of being beat up after 8 years in the NFL and playing for a team that really had kind of sucked the life out of football for him was enough for Calvin Johnson to step away. Number 3, Aaron Donald. When Aaron Donald retired 2 seasons ago, I was shocked. Absolutely shocked. Now, he's a little older than all of the players I've mentioned thus far. Aaron Donald was 32, and he was coming off of a 2022 season where injuries really hampered his ability to play the game at a high level. But he got back in 2023 and what looked to be prime Aaron Donald form. In his career, Aaron Donald's career, 9 years in the league, 98 sacks, 7 straight All-Pros. He was a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. He was a Defensive Rookie of the Year. He was a Super Bowl champ. He did it all. And that was one of the big things that Aaron Donald cited. Well, it was shocking to see him go. I just kind of figured he'd be like a Cam Hayward. Cam Hayward last season for the Pittsburgh Steelers at age 35 was a first-team All-Pro. I just figured Aaron Donald would continue to churn out All-Pro seasons into his mid-30s, that he had 3 or 4 great ones left. But that wasn't the case. I think we forget Aaron Donald, size-wise, was not massive for a defensive lineman. He weighed about 285 pounds. He was about 6'2", 285. Now, Cam Hayward, by comparison, is 6'3", 300. A lot of these other defensive tackles are into the 315, 320 range. They're a lot thicker and sturdier. Aaron Donald's quickness and the leverage with which he played and his explosion were the things that made him so great. But having these 320-some pound offensive linemen wear down on him year after year and giving away 25, 30 pounds to most of them was a disadvantage. And once he got hurt and he maybe lost a little of that explosion, I think he saw the writing on the wall. And he straight up just said, I've done everything. Again, Defensive Rookie of the Year, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, All-Pro 7 straight seasons, Super Bowl champ. What else is there to prove? And so he decided that it was time to walk away. And he did so at the top of his game. And really, that's what shocks us. These guys that do so at the top of their game. Now, the top 2. You could probably guess who the top 2 are going to be. Certainly one of them. Those of you who are younger may not be able to name the person that I'm going to put as number 1 on this list because we have to go back for that. But you can certainly name the individual who is next. Number 2, Barry Sanders, another Detroit Lion. My goodness, the unfortunate Lions have a way of pushing their stars out of the game early. Doesn't bode well for a guy like Aiden Hutchinson. Barry Sanders, 31 years old, 10 NFL seasons. In those 10 NFL seasons, he had over 15,000 rushing yards. He averaged for 10 years over 1,500 yards a season. His final 5 years in the league, he averaged nearly 1,700 yards per season, 1,696 to be exact. That's his final 5 years. So you want to talk about a guy going out on top. This is a guy who steps away from the game. Well, he's in the midst of a 5-year run where he's averaging 1,700 yards per season. And you know what's phenomenal about this too? When he steps away, again, at age 31, clearly in his prime, clearly with a lot left in the tank, he wasn't as worn down as some of the other players because he never got hit. Nobody ever got a clean shot on Barry Sanders. He was just too elusive. But when he stepped away, he was only 1,457 yards behind Walter Payton to become the all-time leading rusher in league history. Imagine that. That's one more season. That's one more normal Barry Sanders season. 1,457 is below his career average of yards per season. One more average Barry Sanders season, and he becomes the all-time leading rusher in NFL history. I don't know how many players would have stepped away from the game with that carrot dangling. But he did. He did. He's another one who, like Aaron Donald said, I don't feel like I have anything left to prove. Now, he didn't have the team success that Donald ultimately realized with the Rams. But individually, I guess Barry Sanders felt there's nothing left to play for. Maybe I go one more year and I set the record, fine, but I've already proven what I can do. I don't need to prove it again. And so he steps away at age 31. Number one, the single greatest player to leave the game of football in their prime, or in the estimation of most observers, early, Jim Brown. Jim Brown, 9 seasons in the NFL with the Cleveland Browns in the 1950s and 1950s and 60s, 9 seasons, 9 Pro Bowls, 8-time All-Pro, 3-time league MVP, Offensive Rookie of the Year, NFL champ. When he leaves the game, he's the all-time leading rusher, 12,312 yards in just 9 seasons. The numbers, though, don't begin to describe the dominance that Jim Brown held over the NFL during his time with the Cleveland Browns. He was at 6'2" and 225 to 230 pounds. He was as big as a lot of linemen who played the game in those days. And as a guy, nobody really tested you in the 40, but in terms of football speed, he was faster than everybody on the field. So he's as big as the lineman, and he's faster than everybody on the field. And when you watch clips of Jim Brown, old black and white clips of Jim Brown playing football, it looks like a grown man running around against a bunch of middle school kids, just shrugging them off, throwing them to the ground, straight arms and stomping on guys, and then whirling away from them and running away from the defensive backs. I mean, Jim Brown was a unicorn in the game of football in a way that his contemporary, Wilt Chamberlain, was in basketball, a unique figure who dominated the game on an unprecedented level in ways we've never seen before. And then at just age 29, at the height of all this, without the injuries, he wasn't a guy who had a lot of injury issues. He left to pursue an acting career, which is fascinating. Jim Brown left and went to Hollywood, and he actually made a bunch of pretty good movies. He became a fairly serious and well-respected actor. And he would then go on, after his acting career ended, to be involved in civil rights work and did a ton of work for inner city children out in the California area. Jim Brown lived an interesting life. A man of character and principle who walked away from the game of football at age 29 because he felt he had other callings, and would then go on to realize those callings. So, the Frank Ragnow news. Surprising when you hear it. Devastating for somebody like my son, who's a Lions fan and now feels as though they're looking at almost like starting over again. But ultimately, when you look at the decisions that these men have made, it's hard to argue with any of them. And obviously they're personal, so you can't argue with somebody's personal decision. But when you look at the guys who left for health reasons Totally understandable. You want to be able to walk normally when you're 50 years old. Or the guys who feel like they've done everything that they can and they don't necessarily need to do it anymore. Or the guys like Jim Brown who feel like there's something else for them and they want to get to that. It's a fascinating list of individuals. So, Frank Ragnow, Godspeed. I hope whatever's next for you, that you're as successful as you were as a football player, because Frank Ragnow was a heck of a football player. All right, that's our Tuesday episode of the Call Sheet Daily. Join me tomorrow, Whiteboard Wednesday. And last week we did offensive execution in the 2-minute drill, and it got a pretty good response from people. So I said, hey, let's do the companion this week. And so this week, tomorrow, we're going to do defensive execution in the 2-minute drill. How does a defense prepare for those end game scenarios? And I'll have as my guest Coach Jimmy Haratopoulos, longtime defensive coordinator, and he'll talk us through it. So join me then. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Take care.